You know, as much as I thought about making another Arthur video, I didn't imagine having to make another one so soon, for very similar reasons. Let's cut to the chase, shall we? This country's kind of in disarray right now, and PBS has decided to tackle one of its many issues in a special that's about to air in a few months. They've been steadily releasing promotional material for it, and as such, this video has resurfaced a couple days ago.
And now, a message from Arthur.
Not only does it completely invalidate Review Your Life's entire existence, but it also does something that many would be shocked to discover. It condemns racism.
You what?
Now, as hard in the paint that Arthur has previously gone as far as social issues are concerned, this is nice to hear them reaffirm their stance. Surprisingly, or perhaps unsurprisingly, right? Twitter had some things to say about it. A lot of things, actually, which is why we're here today. I posted an abridged version of this segment in a tweet, and as expected, it's gotten pretty far. I'm still getting the notifications from it as I speak. It's still making the rounds. As such, of course, there's a fair amount of opposition to it. Before we get to the meat and potatoes, I want to knock out a few easy head scratchers, right? No, they did not see the George Floyd clip. As they previously discussed, somebody nondescript got hurt outside of the Sugar Bowl, which is a show-specific location. No, this is not a fourth wall break. This is just a normal conversation between three people about what they're seeing going on in the world. Up until the very end, that is.
Remember, kids, talk, listen, and act.
Yes, there are real-world issues in Arthur. Yes, it's always been like this. Rain has been black, like, forever. And yes, the animation is weird now. It's been like that for a while, since season 16. But don't worry, because you have 15 others to go and fawn over. That being said, the most salient piece among the opposition to this segment is a rather well-worn talking point that I didn't even realize was a thing. For reasons that'll probably be heavily explored in somebody else's video, or maybe even my own, who knows, the Arthur characters are not really the animals that they've been deemed as. At least, not to the degree that you've been believing. See, from the first book onward, these characters have been hitting new demarcations on the sliding furry scale, but they always eked closer to the human side than animal. It's just the natural state of evolution, see. In this series at large, these characters never had these animalistic traits alluded to, whether directly in dialogue and writings or in the narrative elements of the story. Later on, when it became more evident these guys were more person than not, the earliest books would be revised visually to reflect this.
Racism is so unfair. No one should ever judge someone by the color of their skin.
This phrasing is rather awkward, but it doesn't invalidate the core message or how it may apply to the Arthur universe. Yes, they are furries, but they do care about racial issues, and that's surprisingly normal. Why is it that some of you will accept the worst gun allegory in OKKO, let's be furries, but when Arthur says that racism is bad, suddenly it's invalid? It doesn't really make sense. Real furries can't hold guns anyway. What point being is that these design elements are just aesthetic. Right? This was not Zootopia, this never was Zootopia, never will be Zootopia, and quite frankly, it will be better off if it was not Zootopia. See, since they didn't have to spend all their time pontificating upon the merits of a well-balanced, anthropomorphized society, the writers of Arthur got to touch on issues that are actually important, like 9/11 and cancer and racism.
I was talking to Mrs. McGrady the other day. She said there's a really long history of black people not being treated fairly in this country.
This kind of leads into another common argument, right? The propaganda angle. See, the sheer mass of topics that Arthur's addressed since 1996 is absolutely eclipsed the moment they start saying something that they've always embodied in theme. That racism is lame. Apparently, even when topics like this are getting tackled head on, this is still excessive and patronizing.
It has to stop. We have to do something. Yeah!
Honestly, this tweet says much more than I could, but let me try to explain this very earnestly. It sounds incredibly suspect to support these moves when they're about other issues, but not be on board when they're about race or gender. If a gay rat wants to have a wedding, the kids cannot know about it. But if they gotta learn about autism or crisis management or whatever, it's pretty much okay with y'all. Arthur has not only frequently addressed social issues, but they've always been consistent with how they do so. Actually, it's the more benign pedestrian conflicts that they've been more likely to screw up. The only reason why y'all have this meme is because people recognized the absurdity or relatability for some of this plot's apex and they ran with it. You say that this is unnatural and weird, and because of that, it has to be a product of a political corporate agenda. But this has definitely happened before. This is public television after all. In fact, it's happened like earlier this summer.
They look upset. Are the protesters sad?
They are sad and upset, and they have every right to be, Elmo.
And like earlier this summer, you guys continue to cry foul on lore that you know nothing about. I only remember that because I made this stupid tweet in response to it and it ended up in an article, and I'm amazed that not only that happened, but that I had to say anything, right? Evidently, we need to be refreshed on thematic elements of shows we were watching yesterday as fetuses. These are real issues that affect real people, and these shows address them as such. Nothing changes just because these real elements hit a fictional reality. Just because they're being reiterated by a cartoon aardvark child or a furry red puppet of the corporate establishment doesn't make them any less true to life, okay? But don't take my word for it.
Okay, so this is gonna be the most serious I've ever been talking about something. Because, honestly, this is a serious topic. And as someone who's black and super passionate about Arthur, I can safely say that I know my shit. Now, I can understand how people who are a bit, como se dice, stupid, might be surprised that this show is touching on the issue of race at all, let alone in this fashion. People long for the glory days when Arthur and life was innocent, and didn't have to deal with the nasty, icky politics of today, invading everything, and having leftists brainwash everyone with the agenda of... Let me look at my notes. Treating marginalized and oppressed people properly, and talking about oppression and hoping we can end it one day. Nigga, how is that bad? Maybe you were growing up in a time where you didn't have to lean into the more subtle metaphors of these episodes where these topics were discussed. But hey, the kids watching Arthur now, especially the black kids, don't have that advantage. They don't have that privilege. Young black kids aren't being brainwashed into being activists. We all, in some form, are fighting for our goddamn lives every time we get out of bed. It's not inspiring to me to see a little black girl marching for family, because to me, I feel it's goddamn heartbreaking that so much time has passed and yet we've made so little progress to end this pain. And guess what? That little black girl, her white friends don't have to give a shit. Don't worry, Buster, this doesn't affect you. No, you see, people actually think like that. The thing I want to hone in on, and hopefully that other people actually take to heart, is that black people don't get the chance to wait for this to end. This has been our lives, our families' lives. If you think that it's propaganda for a children's show that have positive morals outside of freaking red and blue make purple, if you're gonna cancel your HBO Max subscription and cable package over Elmo talking about racism, you gotta admit two things. You gotta admit that either A, you've been in a position of life where you can just shrug off people's suffering and cynically think that any piece of media directly addressing these issues is plaguing our society as virtue signaling SJW communist garbage. Or B, you only like media when it has political ideas you agree with. or none at all. For some of you, it may very well be both, and you need to look at yourself in the mirror and address that up front. I don't get how people will guzzle down a bunch of 90s wank and praise fucking Hey Arnold in retrospect for all the topics they discuss being oh so deep. Granted, the topics that are being discussed by Hey Arnold are very good, but people don't actually let it absorb. They just feel smarter for actually catching on to this years later. But when something hits close to home in a show from these times, people are up in arms. I miss when cartoons weren't shoving gayness down our throats. These cow art shows are gonna corrupt my child. Do you guys really hate these shows for art style, or are you just using it as a front to mask your intolerance toward these issues? Because it's not like the shit you grew up with was above discussing these issues, you just didn't realize it. I can't actually say that is inherently a bad thing, but if you're in a position where you just hate these issues or having another perspective on these issues being discussed in anything, I guess you gotta throw all your mint condition VHSs of Courage the Cowardly Dog out, because you know Cartoon Network and lesbian relationships apparently don't mix for you, so you might as well give up the stuff you actually like too. And rather people just directly say I hate black and marginalized people and admit they're racist and bigoted and try to have any sort of flawed argument against it short existing. Stop getting hung up on the fact that they're animal people and refusing to admit that black people canonically exist in the Arthur universe. Wake up, smell the coffee, the stakes is high.
Wow.
The only takeaway I got from this was that we need to push this more. Cartoons have been doing this for literal decades now, and for people to act like this is a stunning revelation means that we have to get their attention more. It takes zero effort for someone as polarizing as Logan Paul to spout off an Angela Davis quote. But believe it or not, it still makes a world of difference to hear him say it for many.
I'm embarrassed that it's taken me 25 years to realize this. It is not enough to be not racist. You have to be anti-racist.
If this is really so shocking to so many people, then we gotta keep the momentum for when Arthur finally ends, which, spoiler alert, is not very far from now. Basically, every modern kids show does preach the benefits of being a diverse, egalitarian society, but they have to go harder in the paint. Like, this is cool, I totally get it, but it's not enough. The tides of change are upon us, and I believe we need another push. So allow me to leave you with a little brain teaser, huh? It's a simple message, and it comes from the heart. Believe in yourself. And delete Twitter. Also, don't be a knitter.
Knitter! Knitter! Knitter!
And I say, it's a simple message, and it comes from the heart. Oh, believe in yourself.